Billionaire's twins hadn't spoken in 2 years, until the new nanny unlocked a miracle no doctor ever could. Billionaire Elias Thornwell lived in a mansion so quiet that even footsteps seemed too loud. But nothing was quieter than his 6-year-old twins, Leo and Lily. They had not spoken a single word since their mother died 2 years earlier. Doctors tried. Therapists tried. Specialists from 3 countries tried. But the twins only stared, nodded, or hid behind each other. Elias was losing hope. Until one morning, his head butler whispered, "Sir, the new nanny has arrived." When Nia Carter stepped into the mansion, something in the air shifted, soft, barely noticeable, but real enough that even the polished silence of the billionaire's home seemed to hold its breath. She did not look like what Elias expected, not at all like the parade of expensive nannies who came before her with their stiff smiles, glowing resumes, and rehearsed promises. Nia was different. She walked with the calm strength of someone who had lived through storms and learned how to light candles in the dark. Her curly black hair framed a face warmed by deep brown skin, and her eyes, steady, gentle, but undeniably scarred, held a quiet story of their own. She took in the room without judgment, noticing everything: the sterile perfection of the marble floors, the way Elias stood like a man who built walls inside himself, the photographs of the twins where they were always smiling, even though the real children hadn't smiled in months. But she didn't approach Elias. Instead, she lowered herself to the floor, kneeling directly in front of the twins with slow, deliberate care, like someone approaching frightened deer. She didn't speak right away. She let silence settle, not heavy, not demanding, just open. The twins clung to each other, the older boy holding his sister's hand with a protectiveness far beyond his age. Their eyes flicked toward Nia, then away, then back again, as if they were trying to understand whether this woman was safe or simply another adult who would give up on them. Elias watched, arms crossed, half doubtful, half desperate. No nanny had lasted longer than a week. No one had been able to reach the twins. No one had understood their silence, but Nia didn't look frustrated. She didn't look impatient. She smiled gently, her voice a soft whisper that felt like a warm blanket being draped over cold shoulders. "I won't rush you," she murmured, her tone so delicate it seemed woven out of light. "I speak quiet too. When you're ready, I'll listen." The twins didn't move, their faces still blank, their shoulders still tense. But something so small Elias almost thought he imagined it, shifted in their expressions. A flicker, a tiny, fragile thaw. The little girl's grip on her brother loosened by a fraction. The boy's eyes lifted just an inch higher than before. They didn't turn away. For the first time in months, they didn't turn away. Nia felt it. She didn't celebrate, didn't smile too wide, didn't interrupt the fragile thread forming between them. Instead, she simply stayed at their level, breathing with them, letting them see that she wasn't afraid of their silence and wasn't going to break it by force. Elias felt a strange ache in his chest, watching the moment unfold, an ache made of hope he didn't trust and fear he couldn't hide. He had spent fortunes trying to fix what had happened to the twins after their mother's death, hiring specialists, therapists, tutors, healers, anyone who promised results. But none of them had understood the children. They tried to analyze the silence, diagnose it, correct it. Nia did something entirely different. She accepted it. She respected it. She honored it. The room grew still around them, the late afternoon sunlight slipping through the tall glass windows, painting a soft glow around the 3 figures on the floor, Nia in the center, the twins holding on to each other, Elias watching from a distance he suddenly wished he didn't have to maintain. The twins' eyes stayed locked on Nia's face. They didn't smile, they didn't speak, but their breathing softened, their shoulders uncoiled a little, and their bodies leaned, not toward her yet, but no longer away. And in that tiny shift, that small miracle of trust, something new began, not loudly, not suddenly, just quietly. Like the first warm breeze before spring, whispering that change was possible, that healing could bloom in silence, and that maybe, just maybe, this woman who didn't fit the room was exactly the one they had been waiting for. Days passed, and the mansion, once cold, echoing and painfully quiet, began to breathe again, not with loudness but with a different kind of life, one made of soft gestures and fragile beginnings. Nia never forced the twins to speak, never demanded explanations, never pushed them beyond the boundaries of their wounded hearts. Instead, she entered their world gently, like someone stepping barefoot into a sacred space. She drew with them on the living room floor, her fingers moving slowly so they could follow without pressure. She danced with them in the hallway, twirling lightly, letting them decide whether to join or simply watch. She built pillow forts tall enough to hide inside, forts that became tiny safe kingdoms where no fear could enter. And at night she told bedtime stories not with loud voices or dramatic flourishes, but with expressive hands, animated eyebrows, and soft facial expressions that painted entire universes without a single spoken word. And bit by bit, the walls began to crack. Leo, the older twin, who once flinched at any adult approaching him, started handing Nia crayons one by one, choosing colors for her as if inviting her into the secret palette of his mind. Lily, the younger one, who used to hide behind her brother, began tugging gently at Nia's sleeve whenever she wanted attention, never speaking, but speaking perfectly through her eyes. Their bodies softened around Nia, their fear loosened its grip. And then the first miracle, a giggle, silent, breathy, but unmistakable. Then another, and another. They laughed without sound, but their eyes sparkled with a joy that hadn't touched them in far too long. Elias watched from afar, standing in doorways, pretending to be busy, hiding behind half-open office doors as if transparency might break the delicate progress unfolding in front of him. He had tried everything, specialists, therapists, expensive treatments, yet none of them had created even a crack in the twins' silence. But Nia, she wasn't just reaching them. She was rebuilding them from the inside out. Every day Elias found himself staring, stunned, confused, hopeful, overwhelmed. He would catch Leo handing Nia a drawing. He would see Lily crawling into her lap. He would hear the faint, airy rhythm of silent laughter drifting through the halls like the ghost of a sound returning home. And it scared him, not because it was wrong, but because it was working. Because it was waking up something inside him he had tried to bury, belief. One evening, after watching Nia guide the twins through a wordless bedtime story about a brave little bird who forgot how to sing but learned how to fly again, Elias finally broke the silence between them. "Why them?" he asked, his voice low, raw, almost pleading. "Why you? What makes you different?" Nia paused, still sitting on the floor with Lily asleep against her shoulder and Leo curled up beside her. She didn't look at Elias right away. She brushed Lily's hair back gently, her touch filled with a tenderness that came from a place deeper than professionalism. Only then did she answer, her voice a quiet truth wrapped in old wounds. "Because," she said softly, "I know what it's like to lose a mother and the sound of your own voice." The words hung in the air, not dramatic, not loud, just honest, so honest Elias felt it like a weight settling into his chest. He suddenly understood that Nia wasn't helping the twins out of training or talent. She was helping them out of memory, out of empathy carved from her own brokenness. She knew their silence because she had lived inside her own. She knew their fear because she had once shivered through nights with no one to translate her pain. She knew their grief because she had swallowed her own until it nearly drowned her. And now, sitting in the dim glow of the twins' nightlight, Nia wasn't just a nanny. She was the first person in a long time who saw the twins not as a problem to solve, but as hearts to heal. Elias felt something shift inside him, something he didn't have a name for yet, something he wasn't sure he was allowed to feel, but he couldn't deny it. The twins were changing. The house was changing. He was changing, all because one woman who didn't fit the world of billionaires somehow fit perfectly into the quiet spaces of two broken children. And for the first time since tragedy stole the light from his home, Elias allowed himself to hope. One evening, after tucking the twins into bed and waiting until their breathing softened into the calm rhythm of sleep, Nia sat alone in the dimly lit hallway, her back resting against the cool wall as the weight of the day settled into her bones. It wasn't exhaustion, at least not the kind that comes from physical work. It was the emotional heaviness that comes from opening old wounds in order to help someone else heal theirs. The soft glow of the nightlights cast warm patterns on the floor, turning the long hallway into a quiet tunnel of memories she had spent years trying to bury. Elias approached slowly, as if afraid to break whatever held her so still. His footsteps were soft but unmistakable, the kind of careful steps a man takes when he is stepping toward something fragile. When he reached her, he didn't sit right away. He studied her expression, the faraway look in her eyes, the slight tremble in her fingers, the gentle strength she carried even in stillness. "You speak like someone who understands trauma," he said gently, his voice carrying a mixture of curiosity, concern, and something deeper he didn't dare name. Nia closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. Then she took a slow, steady breath, the kind of breath that opens doors long kept shut. "When I was 8, she began softly, "I stopped talking for an entire year." Elias froze, the confession hitting him with the force of truth he wasn't prepared for. Nia's voice didn't shake, but the memory behind it did. "My mother died in a fire trying to save me," she continued, her words spilling out like quiet raindrops. "I got out, she didn't, and for a long time I thought my voice died with her." Elias lowered himself to the floor beside her, no longer the billionaire with perfect posture and a polished image, just a man trying to understand the woman who had walked into his home and brought life back into it. She stared ahead, her eyes distant, seeing flames that no longer burned but still lived inside her mind. "No one knew how to reach me," she whispered. "Doctors tried, therapists tried, family tried, but the harder they pushed, the deeper I sank." Her voice softened to almost nothing, until a teacher didn't push at all. Elias felt something in his chest tighten. "What did she do?" he asked quietly. Nia's eyes glistened with a gentle kind of gratitude. "She sat with me, drew pictures beside me, let me write instead of talk. She let me feel safe in silence, and little by little I came back." She exhaled shakily, the memory still tender after all these years. "So I promised myself," she continued, "that if I ever met a child locked behind silence, I would give them what I needed back then." Elias had no words, none strong enough, none soft enough. He looked at her, not at the calm, collected woman he thought he hired, but at the survivor behind her, the girl who lost a mother, the child who had lived inside silence until someone taught her that quiet didn't mean broken. And in that moment, he understood why the twins responded to her. She wasn't guessing their pain, she remembered it. She wasn't easing their fear, she knew it. She wasn't reaching them with skill or training, she was reaching them with empathy carved from fire and loss. The hallway stayed silent for a long moment, a gentle, shared silence, not empty, not awkward, but filled with understanding. Just as Elias opened his mouth to speak, a soft sound interrupted them. The creak of a door, the whisper of tiny feet. They both turned. From the dim glow of the twins' bedroom, two small figures peeked out, Leo holding a worn teddy bear by its paw, Lily clutching the edge of his shirt. Their eyes were wide, not with fear but with something tender, something trusting. Leo stepped forward first, offering the teddy bear out with both hands, as if giving Nia something precious, something sacred. Lily followed, inching close enough for her tiny fingers to brush Nia's arm. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. The silent gesture said everything. They wanted Nia to hold the teddy bear. They wanted her comfort. They wanted her. Something was changing, not just in the twins, not just in the mansion, but in the space between Nia and Elias, in the way he saw her, in the way she allowed herself to be seen, in the fragile, blooming trust that was beginning to bridge every broken corner of this house. One stormy evening, the kind where the sky seemed to roar with ancient fury, lightning cracked across the darkness in jagged white veins that lit up the entire horizon. Thunder rolled a heartbeat later, shaking the windows of the massive mansion as if some invisible giant had struck the earth with its fist. Rain lashed against the glass in relentless sheets, the wind howling like a creature trying to claw its way inside. The twins had always been sensitive to sudden sounds, but storms, unpredictable, loud, violent, were their greatest fear. And tonight, the storm was merciless. The mansion lights flickered once, twice, then went completely dark, plunging the hallways and rooms into a suffocating blackness that swallowed everything. Lily's tiny body began to tremble immediately, the darkness pressing in on her like the walls were closing. Leo clamped his hands over his ears, his face tightening in panic, his breathing ragged and silent as tears streamed down his cheeks. Elias, caught between the shock of the sudden blackout and the sight of his children unraveling, froze in place, his heart pounding violently against his ribs. He had seen their panic before, but never this intense, never this fast. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He didn't know how to reach them, he never had. But Nia did not hesitate for even a second. Her instincts moved faster than the storm outside. She swept toward the twins with calm urgency, her presence steady and grounding, like an anchor in a violent sea. She dropped to her knees, gathering both children into her arms in one fluid motion. Lily burrowed into her chest, shaking uncontrollably, and Leo clung to her sleeve like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. "Breathe with me," Nia whispered, her voice soft but strong, giddy, warm. 1, 2, 3, she breathed with them, slow and deep, matching her rhythm to theirs, letting them feel her calm through the rise and fall of her chest. Leo's grip loosened just slightly. Lily's breathing paused, then tried to sync with Nia's. The storm raged on outside, but inside Nia created a small, fragile world of stillness. She reached for the small flashlight she always kept in her pocket. Elias had once wondered why she carried it, but now he understood. She flicked it on, and a warm, gentle beam illuminated their faces. Not harsh, not bright, just enough to paint safety where the darkness had swallowed everything. She began humming, a soft, delicate lullaby. The melody drifted through the hallway like a warm memory, quiet enough to soothe, steady enough to hold. It was the same lullaby her mother used to sing, the one she had clung to long after the fire took her away. Nia hadn't hummed it in years, but tonight it rose from her heart as naturally as breathing. The twins clung to her as though she were the only light left in the world. Elias watched from the shadows, unable to look away, his eyes stinging with a mixture of awe, relief, and something deeper he didn't dare acknowledge. He saw the way Lily's trembling slowed, the way Leo's sobs softened into small, shaky breaths, the way both children melted against Nia as if her presence alone protected them from the thunder. Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating the hallway in a brief explosion of white. Thunder crashed after it, loud enough to rattle the floors, and then something unbelievable happened. As the thunder boomed, Lily, tiny, terrified Lily, lifted her head just enough to look at Nia. Her lips parted. And for the first time since her mother's death, a sound escaped. A tiny, broken, breathy whisper. Nia, it wasn't loud. It wasn't steady, but it was a voice. Her voice. Leo's head shot up, eyes wide, stunned. Elias covered his mouth as tears flooded his vision. And Nia, strong, steady, brave Nia, felt her entire world tilt, because that one fragile word carried the weight of a miracle. In the middle of darkness, in the middle of fear, Lily spoke, and it changed everything. The thunder crashed again, a violent, shattering boom that rattled the windows and vibrated through the walls like the sky itself was breaking open. The moment it struck, Lily's small body jolted, and she buried her face deep into Nia's chest, gripping fistfuls of her shirt with trembling fingers. Then, with a sob that tore itself free from the cage of silence she'd lived in for months, she cried out, Mama." The sound was tiny, broken, and raw, but it hit the room like a lightning bolt. Elias felt the breath leave his lungs. He staggered back a step, his hand flying to his mouth as disbelief and heartbreak collided inside him. Nia froze for only a fraction of a second, long enough for the weight of that single word to crash into her heart, before she wrapped her arms tighter around Lily, rocking her gently as the little girl sobbed against her. Lily's voice, her actual voice, shook with a pain she had been carrying alone for far too long. And then Leo, trembling violently, lifted his head from Nia's shoulder. His lips quivered, his chest heaved, and in a ghost-like whisper he breathed, "Mama, don't go." It was a plea, a memory, a wound ripped open by the storm and soothed by the one person who had managed to reach them. Elias' knees buckled, and he leaned against the wall to keep from collapsing completely. Tears streamed down his face, hot and relentless. He had prayed for their silence to break, but he had not expected it to break like this, with grief, with memory, with the raw ache of children calling for a love they had lost. They weren't mistaking Nia for their mother. They were calling to their mother, calling for her, something they had not done since the night she died in the accident that shattered all three of their lives. And somehow, the storm, the blackout, the fear, everything had cracked them open enough for the words to escape. Nia held both children closer, one arm wrapped protectively around Lily while the other hand rested against the back of Leo's head, grounding him, anchoring him, letting him feel something steady in a world that had taken too much. Her voice, soft as a lullaby and strong as a promise, brushed the air around them. "I'm here," she whispered, her breath warm against their hair. "You're safe. You can speak when you want. You don't have to hold it in anymore." Her words weren't meant to replace what they'd lost. They were meant to cradle it. She knew exactly what it felt like to carry grief so heavy it stole your voice. She understood the suffocating quiet that followed traumatic loss. And now she let them know, with every heartbeat, every embrace, every whispered reassurance, that their silence did not scare her. Their pain did not overwhelm her. Their voices, fragile, trembling, aching, were welcome whenever they were ready. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside something far more powerful was happening. The twins' voices, once locked behind fear, trauma, and grief, had finally broken through, not with joy, not with chatter, but with truth, with memory, with the deepest part of their hearts. Elias sank down beside them, unable to speak, unable to stop the tears. He watched his children, a boy and a girl who had held their pain inside for so long, cling to Nia as if she were a lighthouse in the middle of their darkest storm. And Nia, with her own scars hidden beneath calm strength, held them through the tempest, letting them cry, letting them speak, letting them finally release the words that had been trapped inside since the night their world shattered. Their voices, small, broken, but finally alive, echoed into the dark hallway, soft but undeniable. They had spoken. They had let the silence break, and nothing about their lives would ever be the same again. Next morning arrived with a calmness that felt unreal after the violent storm of the night before. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the mansion, spreading warm gold across the marble floors, as if the world itself was trying to wash away the fear and darkness that had settled in the house just hours earlier. The mansion was quiet, but not with the old, heavy silence that once smothered the halls. This silence was different, gentler, expectant, like the house was holding its breath for something new. Nia entered the living room, still unsure how the twins would feel after the emotional breakthrough they had experienced. She had held them through their tears, their whispered pleas to their mother, their trembling breaths, but she knew healing was never a straight line. She expected them to retreat again, to wake up afraid or overwhelmed. But when she turned the corner, she found both twins already awake, sitting on the carpet with a small box of crayons between them. Leo looked up first. His dark eyes met hers, hesitant, searching but not closed off. He stood slowly, his tiny hands fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. Then he did something Nia wasn't prepared for. He walked to her. He reached for her fingers. He tugged her hand gently, his voice barely above a whisper but unmistakably real as he said, "Nia, play." The word hit her so hard she almost forgot how to breathe. It was soft, breathy, imperfect, but it was spoken, truly spoken. Before she could respond, Lily hopped up beside him, clutching a book to her chest, her small voice trembling but hopeful as she added, "Story, please." The book was one Nia had read with them silently many times, acting out the pictures with dramatic expressions and gentle gestures while they watched from behind the safety of their walls. But now Lily was asking for it with her voice, her own voice. Elias, who had just taken a sip of his morning coffee, choked so hard he nearly dropped the mug. He froze in the doorway, staring at his children like he was witnessing the impossible. His heart slammed against his ribs, and for a moment he felt dizzy with the weight of what he was hearing. Leo tugging Nia's hand, Lily asking for story, words, real words, words he hadn't heard from them in months, words he feared he might never hear again. Did they just, he whispered, but the sentence fell apart, overwhelmed by emotion. His hands shook so badly he had to set the mug down on the nearest table before it shattered. Nia knelt slowly in front of the twins, afraid that any sudden movement might break the fragile magic of the moment. Her eyes softened as she reached out to brush a curl away from Lily's forehead. "You want a story?" she asked gently, her voice trembling despite her effort to keep steady. Lily nodded, clutching the book tighter, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and excitement, as if she didn't quite understand what she had done, only that it felt right. Leo nodded too, his small hand still wrapped around Nia's fingers like he wasn't ready to let go. Nia pulled both children into her arms, hugging them close, feeling their warmth, their breath, their living proof of healing. "Of course," she whispered. "We can play, we can read, anything you want." Elias watched them from a few steps away, tears streaming down his face. He didn't wipe them, he didn't hide them, he couldn't. He had prayed, begged, wished for this moment, but now that it was here it felt unreal, too beautiful, too fragile, too miraculous to trust. For so long the twins' silence had been a reminder of everything they had lost, everything he had failed to protect. But hearing their voices now, shaky, uneven, soft, it felt like the house was being filled with life again. Every syllable felt sacred, every whisper a sign of survival, every tiny word a piece of their souls returning to the world. Leo let go of Nia just long enough to grab a handful of crayons, offering them to her with a shy smile. "Colors with you," he murmured. Lily climbed into Nia's lap, opening the book to the first page, tracing the drawings with her small fingers. "Story," she repeated, a bit louder this time, her voice still trembling but determined. Elias stepped closer, unable to stay away. He stood behind them as they settled onto the rug, watching his children lean against Nia, watching the life he thought they had lost slowly bloom back into their bodies. It felt like watching a sunrise after a year-long night. The mansion wasn't silent anymore, not in the way that had haunted him, not in the way that broke the twins. Now, the silence was filled with possibility, punctuated by tiny voices that sounded like hope reborn. And as Nia opened the storybook and began to narrate softly, the twins listening with wide eyes and open hearts, Elias felt something inside him shift, something he hadn't felt in a long time: faith, gratitude, and the quiet certainty that miracles didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they whispered, and sometimes they spoke for the first time in months through the voices of two children learning to live again. The transformation didn't happen overnight. But it happened. Within weeks, the mansion, once a museum of silence, felt alive again. The twins began speaking in small, brave bursts. Not full conversations yet, just tiny pieces of sound that carried the weight of entire worlds. Maury Juice. Come here. Look near. Daddy, watch. Every syllable was a victory. And laughter, real laughter, echoed through the hallways that once whispered only loneliness. They laughed when Nia pretended to slip on the marble floor. They laughed when Elias made silly voices during bedtime stories. They even laughed at each other, softly, sweetly, the way siblings who trust deeply always do. It was like watching flowers bloom after a long winter. They returned to therapy, not with fear or resistance, but with curiosity, confidence, and courage Elias had never seen in them before. Dr. Ramos was stunned the first time she heard Nia say, "Use your words, baby, slowly, I'm listening." And Leo whispered back, "Okay." Nia repeated calmly, "You're safe." Leo nodded. The doctor had to look away to hide her tears. The twins' nightmares faded too. Storms no longer sent them running to hide in dark corners or under beds. Instead, they slept tucked together, their breaths steady and peaceful, sometimes clutching Nia's scarf or one of her old soft toys. For Elias, every night felt like a miracle he didn't deserve. He would stand quietly in their doorway, hand resting on the frame, just watching them sleep. Not as a billionaire, not as a man who owned half the city, but as a father who had once feared losing his children to silence forever. One evening, when the sun was melting into the horizon, Elias found Nia standing alone on the mansion balcony. Her hair swayed in the warm breeze as she stared out at the gardens the children had recently rediscovered. Gardens where they now chased butterflies, splashed water, and giggled with a freedom that once seemed impossible. Elias stepped beside her. "Nia," he said quietly. She turned, her expression gentle, glowing in the golden light. He swallowed hard before he spoke. Emotion cracked through his voice. "You didn't just help them speak." Nia blinked, surprised. "You brought them back to life." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Only the sound of leaves rustling far below filled the space between them. Nia's eyes softened. She shook her head slowly. "No, Mr. Blackwood." Elias waited. "They chose to come back," she said. "I just held the door open." Her words struck deeper than she knew. Before Elias could respond, sudden footsteps pattered behind them. In Ireland, the twins burst onto the balcony like two little comets. Leo grabbed her leg, Lily wrapped both arms around her waist. They giggled uncontrollably as they clung to her, their cheeks pressed against her apron. Nia laughed, bending down to hug them tightly, kissing the tops of their heads. Elias watched, heart full and aching in the best way. 2 years ago, the mansion had felt like a castle cursed by silence. Rooms filled with luxury, but empty of warmth. But now there were crayons scattered on the kitchen island. Little socks left on the staircase. Tiny fingerprints on the glass doors. Bedtime songs drifting down the hall. Giggles erupting at breakfast. And Nia's voice, gentle, steady, full of patience, giddy, reassuring, loving. The mansion had changed. No, the family had changed. Elias felt something loosen inside him, something that had been locked away since the day he lost his wife. Hope. Real, living hope. Leo tugged on Nia's sleeve. Story time. Outside, Lily added. Nia smiled, Okay, but only one chapter. The twins cheered and ran ahead, their steps echoing across the marble floor. As Nia followed them, Elias stood alone for a moment on the balcony, listening. For the first time in 2 long, heavy years, the mansion didn't just look like a home. It sounded like one, filled with voices, filled with laughter, filled with life. And deep in his chest, Elias whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Thank you for bringing them back.